Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Dorcas Davis, and I am the Director of Continuing Education and Training for Georgia Public Library Service, and I'll be your host for this session. Today, we're honored to have sought after public speaker, corporate trainer, and author on millennials in the workplace, Mrs. Kendra Elaine. Companies hire Kendra when they want to effectively communicate across generations and increase employee productivity and retention, but they struggle to understand the different generations. This event is supported through the funding from the Library Services and Technology Act through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Before we get started, I do have a few things I must share with you. This session will be recorded and archived. A link will be emailed next week with the access to the archive session. If there are other people watching this webinar with you, we'd love to hear about it so that we can have an accurate head count for our records. Please send us an email with the names of the people watching with you to your state's contact person. You will have an opportunity to submit text questions to our presenter. Just type them in the chat box. You will receive CEUs for this session and the other sessions included in the Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. Lastly, please look for the survey link in your inbox by Friday. And now I will turn things over to Mrs. Kendra Elaine. Kendra, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me. Hello, hello. I just wanted to hop on video and say hello real quick. I know in a virtual setting, sometimes the video can be a little distracting, so I am going to turn the video off for the presentation, and I'll turn it back on during questions and answers at the end. But I did want to say hello. Thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. And I have a whole lot to cover in the next little 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to hop right on in. I'm going to turn the video off. There we go. So like she said, my name is Kendra Elaine. Today we're going to talk about how to manage and lead across generations. Since I will have you for the next 45 minutes or so, I just want to introduce myself. I am a millennial leadership expert. These are a few of the companies that I've worked with, and I do public speaking and corporate training for companies who want to engage and retain their millennials. How I got started with this is myself being a millennial. I've been in corporate and a few different industries for, I've worked since I was 15. And from the age of 15 to my early 30s, so we'll say around 15 years, I had around 40 plus jobs. And yes, you heard that correctly, 40 jobs. So I have worked at quite a few companies. And usually when I tell people that, they say, man, Kendra, you couldn't keep a job. But in all actuality, I never was fired. I've never been fired. So I always like to joke back that those jobs couldn't keep me. I was one of those high performing millennials that just could not sit still. I didn't really know where I was going or what I wanted to do. So I hopped around a lot, and eventually I started hearing about kind of what people were saying about millennials, and I was doing research on it and understanding how companies were just really struggling across the generations. And I wanted to not only dig deeper and get some more information about that, but share from the perspective of a millennial who's worked in companies and give organizations kind of that millennial eye view of kind of where things can be changed, where those communication gaps are. So I got trained in leadership, I got trained as a speaker, and I started going out there just to kind of change the narrative and really to help all of us just have a better working environment to help us all get along. So that's kind of how these trainings came about, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. So our objectives for today, we are going to go an overview of all the generations, some of their likes, dislikes, motivations, and things like that. We're going to touch on some common challenges, and then we're going to end with some ways that we can work together. So some communication tips, tricks, and tools that you guys can start implementing right away to connect with your team, no matter what generation they're in, as far as the makeup of your teams. So, like I said, we have a lot to cover, so we're just gonna hop right on into it. So right now we have 5 generations in the workforce, which we have not had before. So we have what we call our builders, and this generation, sometimes they're called builders, sometimes they're called the silent generation, but they are that 1928 and older. So right now they're 75 plus. And then we have our baby boomers, which are in that 56 to 74 range. We have our Generation X, which is in that 40 to 55 range. Gen Y, or millennials, which is in that early 20s, mid to late 30s range. And then we have our Generation Z, which is 23 and younger right now. And if you look at different research studies, you'll see different date ranges for the generations, because technically the baby boomers is the only generation that was specifically defined by the US Census. Every other generation has kind of been formulated based on whatever research bureau you're looking at. Gallup will say one date range. These date ranges are from Pew Research, PEW, Pew Research, and they base how they capped the millennial generation, saying that this is the group that grew up during the internet boom. So that's kind of how they decided on these dates. But if you look them up, different websites and different research platforms will have kind of, the dates will be, iffy from year to year, but this is kind of the general ranges of the different generations. So when we think about cohort size, our silent and traditionalists, there were about 50 million of them. Baby boomers were about 76 million of them, which at the time was huge. Then we had Gen X was about 55 million. Millennials kind of topped everyone with 80 million. And once they decide kind of where to cap Gen Z, we're pretty sure that Gen Z is going to outrank all of us in the size of their cohort. They're going to be bigger than the rest of us. So they are definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with as they come into the workforce. So why can't we get along? Like, what are the ins and outs of the struggles that we have across the generations? So I'm gonna just kind of talk through this slide. When you think about that, we have 5 generations working side by side here in 2020. What I like for people to understand is the difference in the generations really come from what was going on as they were being raised, as they were being brought up. So if you look at the traditionalists, they were coming up during the Great Depression, during World War II. They were very disciplined. They were taught to have workplace loyalty. They had the desire to move to the burbs, the onslaught of vaccines. So that kind of defined their existence. When we moved to baby boomers, they were Vietnam, the moon landing was happening, civil and women's rights were going on. They are very experimental, they're innovators, they're very hardworking, and they came up with the onslaught of the personal computer. So that's kind of how technology looked at that time. When we think about Gen X, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Gulf War, Gen Xers are very independent, free agents. When I think about Gen X, I always think of latchkey kids. To me, Gen X is that generation that they were like, here's the key, get home, figure it out. And that's what they did. They're very independent. They don't need a lot of shadowing. They're a very get it done generation. They came up with the internet, MTV, the AIDS epidemic, and they came up during, the rise of the mobile phone. So then we come to millennials, and we have, the 9/11 attacks, big on community service, very immediate urgency. So they want things right now. There's a very instantaneous feeling with millennials. they're confident. It's a very diverse cohort. They value diversity, social everything. When you think about Google and Facebook and how they want to be at work and school, everything's very social. And also, when we think of how millennials were brought up, it's a little bit different than like how I described Gen X as those latchkey kids who are like, hey, go figure it out, where millennials were raised by those helicopter parents. And they're called helicopter parents because they hovered over their kids and just, me as a millennial, I have a helicopter parent and she hovered over me everywhere I went. So we are used to, we're just used to different things than some of the other more independent generations. Not to say we can't be independent, but this just gives you some insight into how we were brought up and how that might manifest now into the workforce. When we think about our Gen Z, so 23 and younger, they are very optimistic. They have high expectations. They are all about the apps and technology, social games, tablet devices. I mean, when we think about Gen X, and when I work with companies and their biggest gripe is I can't get them to put their phone down. I don't understand the thing with the phone. The thing we have to understand about Gen X is this is a group, especially as the younger that they get, they literally grew up with a device in their hand or in their face. And so they are more deeply connected to devices than even any of the rest of us are. Not to say that that makes it right and that they should be able to have their device at work, but just for you to understand that when it comes to having those conversations, setting that expectation and those boundaries around devices is literally this is something that they've always had. It's not something that they had to get used to. Technology, apps, smartphones, they grew up with this. So we might have to frame that conversation a little bit different for them. So next, we're going to walk through just some different examples of what each generation kind of considers in these different areas. So for example, to the builders, work is an obligation, a long-term career, often considered who I am. I've oftentimes, when I talk to builders, I talked to one in particular and I asked them, I said, the reason we have 5 generations in the workforce right now is because you all just won't leave. Like, you will not retire. And why are you still here? And they said, and the one said to me, it's like, well, I mean, this is who I am. If I retire, who am I? And I mean, for me as a millennial, I mean, that was just a shocking revelation that they so deeply identify with what they do as a very large part of who they are, just as a holistic existence. Whereas, millennials, we're just kind of, it's what we do, not necessarily who they are. So understanding about them, is very interesting. For baby boomers, work is an exciting adventure. It's a career. They do believe, you work until you retire. Again, that very strong, dedicated mindset to work. Still very much tied to it like the builders and the traditionalists, but maybe not as strongly tied to their identity as the traditionalists were. For Generation X, work is a challenge. It's a contract. It's just a job. It's what I do. They come to work, they do their job, they want to be good at their job, but again, it's not directly tied to their identity. Generation Y, the millennials, even less so. It's a means to an end. It's a fulfillment, and they want it to be flexible. They are doing this to fulfill whether it's the next box on their list to check, okay, I went to college, now I need a job, or it's just to fulfill the fact that they need to pay bills. Oftentimes, it is a means to an end, and later we're going to get to that mindset and dig deeper into that mindset. And, Gen Z is still figuring it out. They really value development as they're coming into this workforce, whether they went to a 4-year college or didn't, because, that generation, they're hearing about millennial student debt. So they're trying to decide, are they going to college? Are they not going to college? Are they going to trade school? Are they going to try and hop right into a job or a position? They're figuring it out, but they really value work where they can get some development, where they can have stability, but they still can grow and learn and just kind of navigate that landscape, because they're coming in a little less confident. They're entering the workforce a little less confident than the rest of us have. So when it comes to respect, the builders feel like they should get respect based on seniority, a very hierarchical view based on seniority and tenure. So the builders age group, there you'll hear things from them like, I've been here 10 years. I've been here 30 years. You respect me because I've been here this long. That's kind of how they deem respect, or they'll say that to someone else. I respect them because they've been doing this for 50 years. They really value and respect seniority. Baby boomers, time and authority. So similar to the builders, boomers believe you work your way up to earn a position of authority. So while they also value time and seniority, it's that additional like authority figure. So, what authority do you have in the company? What authority do you have in the organization? They kind of value those that have worked their way up and are now in a position of power. That's kind of how they base their respect. Generation X is more of a will test you, a little more skeptical of authority figures. So they kind of believe in testing authority. If you deserve it, you'll get it. Again, because Gen X is generally independent, they do want to see that respect given. They want to see how you operate, and they'll kind of test you a little bit. And if they deem that you deserve it, then they will give it. Generation Y, the millennials are a show me generation. They will test you probably further than Gen X will, but they will also seek out authority figures for guidance. They want you to quote unquote get it and take them seriously. One thing I hear from millennials is, if you recognize that millennials are into their 30s now, which means we have years of experience, and they don't want to be treated like children. They want to know that you get it. They want to know that you take them seriously. And that is one way that they will deem the level of respect or not. Generation Z is a give it to get it. Show me respect and I'll give you respect. They're still figuring it out. They're still young and coming into the workforce, but for the most part, this is kind of how they've seemed to be. Entitlement. So when we think of entitlement, often this word comes to mind when people say millennials. They're so entitled. For the sake of understanding this aspect, we're talking about like when they feel entitled to receive something. So builders, again, seniority. I've been here the longest. I'm the top level, or I'm at this level, and I believe that entitles me to this. Baby boomers embrace experience. So I've worked on X amount of projects. I've worked at X amount of companies. I've secured X amount of dollars. I have this amount of experience, and that entitles me to this raise. That entitles me to that position. Generation X is more on merit. So I might not have the seniority. I might not have the experience, but maybe I was recognized in this area. Maybe I got an award in this area. I received a certain merit for this, and I feel that that entitles me to what I'm asking for. Generation Y, millennials, their entitlement is contribution, which when I often talk specifically about millennials, I tell people that oftentimes when you think your millennial is entitled, when you think they're lazy, it's often a misinterpretation of their intentions, or maybe it's not being communicated well. But oftentimes millennials feel like their contribution entitles them to things. So when we say, oh, millennials want to raise right away, how can you want to raise and you've only been here a year? That's because they're not necessarily thinking in terms of time, they are thinking in terms of contribution. So I might not have been here a year, I might not have gotten any awards, I might not have gotten any experience, but if it looks like I'm the highest contributor, if it looks like I'm the best contributor, if I feel like I've been contributing 110% for the last year, usually that's kind of where their frame of mind is when it comes to asking for raises and asking for different positions. They're looking in terms of their contribution. And Generation Z, their desire. They will tell you, I might not have the seniority, I might not have this experience, I don't have any merit, and I might have not contributed a lot yet, but I really, really want this, and I'm going to work really, really hard. And that is why you should give me this raise. And again, for them, since they're so young, coming into the workforce fresh, they're not going to have the experience and the merit and the seniority as some others. So kind of they're leaning on that, their desire and their drive for the things that they want. So coaching and feedback. Builders are very no news is good news. And for me, that so rang true. I was working at a job some years ago, and not my boss, but my boss's boss. I had never met her. I had never met her, not once. And my boss came to me and she was like, "Yeah, I was going over everybody's work with her, and I mentioned your name." And she's like, "Oh, yes, I like Kendra." And she was like, "Really? I didn't think you knew Kendra." And she's like, "I don't." She's like, "Exactly. She's never been in my office. I've never gotten an email about her. No news is good news. I don't know her. I like her. That means she's not causing any problems. She's doing what she needs to do." And I thought that was so funny, but that's really indicative of that age group. No news is good news. When it comes to feedback, they like subtle private recognition on an individual level. They find satisfaction in a job well done. They like to know that they are doing their job well, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. For baby boomers, they tend to be okay with annual reviews or being made aware when something goes wrong. In terms of recognition, they like things that they can put on the wall, whether it's a plaque or something that they can hang up in terms of being recognized for their achievements. Appreciation and public recognition. They like to be appreciated for the things that they've done well and their accomplishments. And they like it probably in front of the team or the department. They like it public recognition. Generation X. So just say it. You don't necessarily need a formal meeting. I think Generation X is kind of where we started to get more into that spot coaching and that spot feedback. Just tell me. We don't have to have a set designated meeting for it. Let's just have those open lines of communication. Gen X kind of started that wave. Reward with time off, freedom, and flexibility. They don't necessarily need something to put on their desk or hang on their wall. They like constructive feedback. And they do like structure and coaching, but they like a hands-off management style. Again, when I think about Generation X, those latchkey kids, give them some instructions and set them free. And for the most part, they will figure it out and get it done. So they like structure and coaching, but you don't have to be very, very hands-on with them. Generation Y, they like frequent feedback and communication. So even more than Generation X, again, if we go back to those helicopter parents, something we kind of took from growing up, we like frequent feedback and communication. Whenever I would speak to HR organizations, I hated annual reviews. Please do not wait to the end of the year to tell me that I'm not getting a raise because I sucked all year. Please tell me today that you do not like me coming in 5 minutes late. Please tell me today that you do not like it when, I take an extra second and sit on my phone or whatever the case may be. Frequent constructive feedback and communication. We'll talk about this later, but how do you create a culture of coaching so you can have that consistent communication? Also, be clear about goals and expectations. Setting those boundaries and those expectations ahead of time can be very powerful with this generation. Supervision and structure. So not necessarily, whenever I say that, people are like, oh, they need a babysitter and they need to be, their hands held all the time. I'm not saying that you need to hold their hand, but it's just, again, goes back to that communication and having that open door policy of, if they need to ask questions, they can ask questions, or you checking in on them, whatever cadence is okay for you. But they do tend to respond to having a little bit more structure than, say, Gen X. So Gen Z is, again, because they're coming into the workforce, again, a little less confident than the rest of us did. They do like constant feedback. 2 out of 3 said they would like feedback or coaching every couple of weeks. 20% said daily. No fear-based management, so they don't like fear as a tactic. And they want to be coached on how to make better decisions and how to be more confident. So again, they're coming in the workforce and they're not really sure, what they're doing. They're not really sure where they're headed. So they are looking for that coaching aspect of how can I make better decisions? How can I be more confident at work and in life? Because again, they're coming in fresh and they're still just kind of figuring it out. And just with the way technology is, the landscape is changing so much. So they're just trying to, hop in the wave as best they can. When it comes to training and development, the builders, it wasn't usually an option for them. They were very much keep your nose to the grindstone. You'll figure it out as you go, just grind it out. And they had the thoughts of training should contribute to the company goals. So if they were to take a training or if they were offered a training, in their minds, it should be in alignment with their company goals because, again, they identified very closely with the company they worked for. For baby boomers, they want to focus on developing within the company. So they want that growth within the company. They believe they move up mostly on seniority, and training should fit company goals, but could be a path to promotion or more. So for them, there's a little bit more of that upward mobility in that. So they want it in line in company goals, but also in their mind, if I'm getting trained in alignment with company goals, that maybe could help me raise my position, maybe get a different promotion because I'm excelling my skills in alignment with our organization's goals. Generation X, they're a little bit more proactive in their development, both in and outside the company. They believe that training will enhance their versatility in the marketplace. So Gen X is a little bit more flexible. They are still loyal to where they work, but they do kind of have more of an open mind in the sense that, training and development, it doesn't have to directly tie to the company goals. Maybe it could be a department goal or a personal growth strategy that it ties into. And they kind of have that open-minded view of, if I take training and development, not only will that make me more valuable in the company that I'm in, but just in the marketplace in general. Generation Y, the millennials seek development through training and work experiences. So that means whether it's like actual sit down, let's train and have this session, or just work experiences like can I shadow somebody in that department? Millennials strongly value development opportunities, and it doesn't always have to look like outside training or bringing in a speaker. Sometimes it is work experiences. Would you like to shadow, the person in this department? Would you like to sit in on this meeting? Would you like to help out on this project? There are a lot of ways that you can make development opportunities happen just all around you. Millennials don't mind learning through mistakes. They don't want to be embarrassed by their mistakes. As long as it's an environment where they feel safe to make mistakes, they don't mind learning through mistakes. And they will seek other employment if development is not offered. one thing I do always say about millennials, a lot of us, we're the generations, we have some differences because of how we were brought up and how technology and the economy was while we were being brought up. But a lot of us ultimately want the same things. We all really do want development. We all really do want a coaching environment. We want a place where we feel safe. But I think millennials is kind of that, not the first generation, but I think since there's so many millennials, it's just hitting the workforce harder, that they are more willing to quit and leave companies when they're not getting those things. Generation Z, they are desperate for development. Again, some of them have decided to go the 4-year degree route, some of them have not. They are desperate for opportunities for development. They value growth opportunities. Again, they lack confidence, and they need those soft skills training. So, again, those complaints about them being tied to their phone, they need those trainings on how to communicate, how to have difficult conversations, how to navigate different customer service situations. They need a little bit more training when it comes to those soft skills, because technology has, I don't want to say crippled them a little bit, but they have been more reliant on, the texting and, all the new technologies that we have. So they definitely benefit from having a little bit more of the soft skills training. When it comes to technology, the builders, as they were growing up, their biggest there was the Hoover Dam, rotary phones, and they were very big on letters and memos. So handwritten sentiments, pick up the phone and talk to me. Baby boomers, their big technology thing was the microwave. They then got into touch tone phones, call me anytime. Generation X, they got into handhelds, so cell phones and pagers. So now, we're mobile and we're taking the technology with us a little bit of everywhere. Sure, the cell phone was like the size of a brick, but you could take it with you. So that was a big deal. Generation Y, so millennials, very intangible. The internet, the cloud, picture phones, emails, social media, everything is on the go. And what, to my point earlier about them being more willing to quit, I always like to point out, the technology is so different because, we don't have to go door to door with our resume anymore. It's so easy to just open up our phone, open up our laptop, go to LinkedIn, Glassdoor, anywhere, and see who's hiring, what culture they have, how much they're paying, what their offices look like, submit our resume, and we could do that in the snap of a finger. So because we're so intangible and because we're used to that, just the dynamic of everything has made it easier to find opportunities other places. Gen Z, just everything. The cloud, smartphones, we're into voice now. So they're talking to Siri, they're talking to Alexa. I mean, Alexa is doing their shopping for them. We have Instacart, Uber, like everything is, Gen Z can run the world from their cell phone. Like they can literally run the world from their cell phone. And if they don't feel like typing on it, they can talk to it. So they are completely immersed in everything technological right now. Probably every aspect of their life has a form of technology in it. And when you think about, bringing, especially Gen Z into the workforce, when you think about bringing them into work, at a library, having that consideration of if they're used to, when they wake up, Alexa, turn on the coffee machine or whatever they're telling. I don't even know what people tell Alexa to do, but they're telling Alexa to do something. They're on their smartphones. And then they come to work. I think one of the frustrations I hear from organizations is, Gen Z and millennials, they want us to have, all this technology, and why don't we have this system and why don't we have that system, and we've never done it that way. Honestly, it's probably in their own minds, an effort to make things better and more efficient just because they're so used to technology. Not saying that you all are doing it wrong, but since that is just at the forefront of their existence, they're going to have a propensity to try and bring it into the workplace or ask why there's not more technology, and just kind of shaping that conversation around you understanding their use and how technology is incorporated in their life can definitely help you have that conversation. Communication. So builders were very formal, respectful, complete sentences, correct grammar, spelling, very to the point and direct. Baby boomers speak openly, direct. They're okay with first names. They also were very big on having congruent body language. We know body language is big in communication. Generation X is a little bit more blunt and direct. They want you to present the facts. It doesn't have to be full, complete sentences. You can do sound bites or bullet points. And they also are very what's in it for me. So what's in it for me? Why are you telling this? What do you need me to do with this information? Millennials are polite. They like action verbs. What do you need me to do? Be descriptive, visual, and humorous. So they're not very formal. And they like positive communication, and they're more used to multimedia, so email, text messaging. They're more relaxed in the terms of how they receive communication. Generation Z, they like positive and motivational, informative, and they're very with the quick and shorthand. So text message, email, get to the point. They're short attention span. So quick shorthand messages, generally works with them. What they need at work. So builders need recognition and respect. They value security and stability, clearly defined rules and policies. Baby boomers like the ability to shine and make contribution. They want clear and concise expectations, recognition, and team support. Gen X, they like flexibility, independence. They like a forward-thinking company that has and accepts new ideas, and they want to be evaluated on merit, and they also want to be kept engaged. Millennials want to be challenged. They don't want to be bored, which is oftentimes why they end up moving from job to job, is if they've gotten bored. They want respect, growth, and development opportunities, and they want an environment that's friendly, supportive, and inclusive. So Gen Z, again, growth and development. They want something competitive and challenging. So anytime you can incorporate any type of gamification into the workday is always good. Coaching, teamwork, and support. So what are some communication blocks that we have? What can we do? We really just need to help each other out a little bit. Give each other some grace. So why I like to cover all those different things that I just covered is, one, for us to just have a better understanding of each other. And really, we just really need to do the basics. Let's talk. Have conversations with your team, because everything that I just went over, just very high level generalizations. But as we all know, everybody has different backgrounds. Everybody has different experiences. And what you want to do to really connect with your team and your employees is to talk, have conversations with them, get to know them, what motivates them, what's their background, and ways that you could tie that into your communication with them while at work. Understanding. We need to seek to understand each other. Again, our motivators, our background, and our experiences. We all have different experiences. Not every millennial is going to fall into the same category. Not every Gen Xer is going to fall into the same category. We're all going to have some slight differences. So let's give each other some understanding. Grace. Another reason why I like to just cover the technology that was happening, what was going on in the economy, what was happening while we were being brought up, our different parental styles, is so we can give each other some grace. When I talk to Gen Xers, when I talk to boomers, when I talk to traditionalists, it's like I give them grace, understanding that they came from a completely different time. And we want to get that same grace in return. So um how can we work together? Let's cut each other some slack. And when it comes to supportive or unsupportive, when you think about your beliefs, I want you to ask yourself not if they're right or wrong, but are they supportive or unsupportive? If you hear millennial and you automatically think, oh, they are entitled, they're spoiled, they're selfish, they're lazy, are those thoughts supportive or unsupportive to the millennials that you work with? Are they supportive or unsupportive to the millennials that you have at home? They may or may not be right, but if you automatically go in with those thoughts, ask yourself, are they supportive or unsupportive? Because what I like to tell managers is if you're going in and you have a certain mindset about any certain group, but even if it's just millennials, that's going to come off in how you interview them. That's going to come off in how you talk to them. It's going to come off in how you coach them. And ultimately, it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if those thoughts are unsupportive, then you're just ultimately not going to get your best work out of someone when you're looking at them like, here's this entitled kid. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, so when you think about your thoughts, if you're a millennial and you have thoughts about boomers, if you're a boomer and you have thoughts about millennials, just ask yourself, are they supportive or unsupportive of the ultimate goal of us working together? So one of the biggest mindset differences I notice in the generations, specifically with other generations and millennials, is a job versus a career. When you think of someone who has a career, their mindset is completely different. They are thinking about long-term success. What can I do to help this company? How can I grow with this company? When I talked to you all earlier, when I introduced myself, I said I had 40 plus jobs. I'm here to tell you that many of those jobs were other people's careers that they had worked years at and planned to retire. And I just didn't see it that way. I saw it as a job. And a job is, a means to an ends. I can't wait to get off work. How long am I going to be here? What's my next step after this? And a lot of that came from, I think it kind of it was some with Gen X, but I think it definitely kicked in with millennials where, the masses were kind of sold a dream, go to college, get a degree, and you'll get a job in your field. And there were a number of people that came out of college and they could not get a job in their field. So they took a job, because, you got to work. And so then from there, they took another job and then another job. And because it wasn't what they wanted to do, because it wasn't the career that they thought, they were in this mindset of this is a means to an end. Now, that doesn't mean that can't change. That doesn't mean we can't change them to see it as a career. But again, how you talk to someone who views it as a career is different than how you would talk to someone who views it as a job, because their mindsets around the company and their position are a little bit different. So one way that you can help kind of shift that mindset, especially for millennials and younger, is communicate the why. The why is very important, and the why is twofold. So we know that millennials and Gen Z are very purpose driven. So they want to know, why the organization is doing what it's doing. So why is the library important? Why is the library important to the community? Why are we doing what we do? And also to take that twofold to that granular level, why are they doing what they're doing? So when it comes to tasks, why am I doing this? And I know a lot of managers, they hate this question. Like, this is the biggest thing that I get is millennials ask why so much. One manager said to me, she's like, you know what? I could come into work, I can go into a boomer's office and say, tomorrow we're going to walk around the building 10 times, bring your tennis shoes. And the boomer will say, okay. I can walk into a Gen X office, say the same thing, and they say, are we going to get dirty? Do I need to wear comfortable shoes? Do I need to wear hiking shoes? Okay, I'm there. I'll go up to a millennial and say the exact same thing, and they'll say, why? And managers get so offended. Like, why are you asking me why? Just do it. And I really just want to tell you, one, again, try and put that guard down, because 9 times out of 10, millennials and younger, they are asking why because they sincerely want to know why. They want to know the purpose, not because they're disrespecting you, not because they're uh doubting you or feeling like you don't know what you're talking about. It's sincerely a why. And I talked about confidence in some areas. Sometimes that their lack of confidence kind of manifests in I want to prove myself. I want to prove that I know something. I want to prove that I can contribute, and I can't give an effective suggestion to help, or maybe a way to make it more effective, if I don't know why we're doing it, if I don't know the outcome that you're trying to get. And when it comes to keeping them engaged, having giving them that why can just be very powerful. And it doesn't have to be I'm answering this question all the time every day. It could be just as easy as a quick, you know we do things this way because we send this to this department, and this helps us do this, and this helps us accomplish this goal, and when you do this, we this helps us. It's just giving them the why can sometimes cut out of a lot of things on the back end, and just giving them that reason. And unless you just have someone who is just genuinely just kind of like disrespectful, I found that 9 times out of 10, they really just want to know the answer. They really are just trying to be engaged in the process and have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. Set clear expectations. So I was giving, I think it was actually this seminar that I was giving, but it was more specifically tailored toward millennials. And I said something along the lines of, sometimes millennials are seen as lazy because you'll see them sitting around. But in our purview, if you've given me a list of tasks to do that maybe you thought would take 4 hours, but I completed them in 3 hours, in my mind, I might think it's okay to sit down for that last hour. But for you as maybe a manager or a coworker, maybe you're like, no, if you completed your tasks, find something else to do. This is an opportunity where maybe you could have set a clearer expectation. I know when I was younger, coming up in the workforce, I had a manager who their motto was, if you can lean, you can clean. And they had a list of things that, okay, if you complete everything you're supposed to do and you have some downtime, you know what? I don't mind you stepping aside and checking your phone for about 5 minutes, but then I expect you to find something on this list to do. And it was a list of things that could always be done, whether it be dusting, straightening up, checking on, make sure you've touched and checked on every customer in the building, whatever it may be. But setting those clear expectations of, okay, I kind of know this is how you work, but I don't want to see you sitting down on your phone. Here are some alternatives for what I expect you to do. Or your start time is 8 a.m. I actually expect you to be here at 9:55 and on the floor at 8 a.m. Setting those clear expectations ahead of time, it makes it easier to make those adjustments later on. So engage. Running out of time, so I'm gonna go through these next things as quickly as I can. Um, engage. So these two images are up here. I read a study from, I believe it was the Yale Business Review on job crafting. And it was talking about how we all craft our own experiences at work. And they did a study of groups who had the same position, but they had different outlooks. So they did a survey of janitors at a hospital, and they surveyed one group that was super happy. They loved their job. They would tell you that being a janitor there was a skilled job that they loved and that they excelled at. And then there was another group that pretty much hated their job. They were grumpy. They would tell you that being a janitor was just the worst. It was a low level, low skill job. And when they looked at the difference between the groups, the happy, more engaged group was intentional about, when they took their routes, they made sure to say hi to the doctors. They ate lunch with the nurses. They knew the nurses' rotation, so they knew, when to go in and take out the trash, and they knew how they fit into the entire ecosystem of the hospital. So they felt involved and engaged in the entire process of the hospital. And so they crafted a very different experience than the other group who kept to themselves. They didn't eat lunch with anybody. They never spoke to anybody when they were making their rounds. They kind of felt invisible and they kind of played that role. So when it comes to understanding that we can craft our own experiences, think about that when you're working with your team members, when you're working with your employees. Are you fully engaged at work? Do you talk to your team members? Do you talk to your employees? And that can start the ball, just leading by example, helping them to then engage and feel a part of the whole ecosystem, so they can have a better experience at work. So creating a culture. Here are some tips on creating a coaching culture. Again, many of the generations like that consistent feedback. They like a coaching environment. So one way that I give feedback to my teams, and what I've noticed that I like, oftentimes we see feedback as a one-way. Yes, I'm so almost done. I'm sorry I'm running over you guys. Um, as a Usually we give feedback as a one-way model, like, hey, you've done this, this, and this. I need you to change this, this, and this. If you're a manager, one thing you can try is this three-way feedback model. It's called notice, like, might. Ask your team, ask your employee, or your team member or whomever, like, hey, let's say they've been there for 30 days. You're like, hey, you've been here for 30 days. Let me ask you, what have you noticed about your first 30 days? And just listen to them tell you about it. Ask them, what have you liked about your first 30 days? Listen to what they tell you about it. What might you have done differently, or what might we could have done differently to make those first 30 days better for you? And listen to what they have to say. And this could be their first 30 days. This could be a project that they worked on. This could be an assignment that they just did. This could be this past week. And what this does is it gives you the opportunity to hear where they're coming from, to hear how they're seeing things, and if you're looking at things through the right lens. Because if I say I didn't notice anything, I liked everything went great, and I wouldn't do anything different, and you see it differently, then you know that we're not looking at things through the same lens. But this also creates more of a conversation. So when you start to check in with me, it doesn't feel like you're just constantly pouring on me, but that you're having a two-way kind of conversation. So let's see. I was going to give tips for a coaching conversation, but I am running out of time. Dorcas, are there any questions?
Yes, there are questions.
All right.
Questions and comments. I'll send them to you now.
All right, let me hop on video here. Woo, I do see a few things. What do you do when the manager is the one who is coming into conversations with an unsupportive mindset? I'm assuming, Christy, if you are the employee and you're saying the manager is coming in with an unsupportive mindset, um, that's something that you can gently address, I would say. Even if that mindset is blatant and apparent, if you feel comfortable, asking, like, hey, where does that come from? Have I done something to facilitate, why you're approaching this in this manner? Or, what do you, if you feel like it's a mindset about millennials, or if you feel like it's a mindset about you, I'm a big proponent of asking the question, like, hey, can I ask, where this is coming from? And, do you feel like it's supportive or unsupportive? Do you feel like I have demonstrated things that feed into that mindset? And trying to approach it in that way. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, um, possibly talking to um, either human resources and trying to figure out how to navigate that conversation. But I think it's definitely something that you can ask, like, hey, where is this coming from, and do you feel like I'm contributing to why you think this about millennials or why you think this about that? See, I'm a zennial. She keeps calling me a millennial. I've already conversed with her upon multiple times to help her learn who I am. She laughs and continued to use the years of birth as the be all of where I fall on the spectrum. Oh, okay. So let her know again, Christy, that the only the only age group that is defined by the census is boomers. Everything else is, all the other generations are really kind of flexible in terms of how they've been defined. So there really isn't a hard and fast cap on millennials. And even if there were, those are all generalizations. Um, Not everybody who falls into those years are going to um, be the same or disseminate the same activities. And if she's unwilling to get to know you and unopen to understanding who you are as a person, um that is a tough road to navigate, especially if you're in a culture where um you can't kind of coach up and work with her on that. I would say continue to try and have the conversations and just educate her on who you are and what motivates you, and maybe start the question with asking about who she is, to kind of like decompress it a little bit, like, hey, why don't you tell me about you, and kind of start it that way and try and have that kind of a conversation. Let's see. One I had, okay, I had three Gen Ys working for me at different times. Each one would say things like, I'm not working today, or I do my own work on Fridays. I'm finally convinced them that if they were being paid, they were there to work. Otherwise, it was cheating the library system. But I never understand their initial viewpoints. Can you explain? You mean they would come into work, like come into work to get paid and say, I'm not working today, or I do my own work on Fridays? Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, now if they are coming in to work um, and expecting to be on the clock and do their own work, I mean, that's a matter of setting that expectation of, like, we're not paying you to support your business. If they're saying, like, I'm not coming in today, like, I need Fridays off to do my own work. Um, Again, I think that's that setting that level of expectation. Um, Setting that level of expectation in the sense of what you expect in terms of working, and I think a lot of millennials and under are caught up in this entrepreneur wave, and you should be doing your own thing, and social media is just telling them that you should be the next Mark Zuckerberg, and why don't you have your own business? And so they're so like locked in on, I should be doing more, I should be doing more, that they're kind of missing the point of where they are. And so, okay, they're giving me the heads up. So we got to stop after this question, but you all will have access to these slides. And this final coaching conversation will be in the slides. This can help you with that as well. And then if they'll send you all the slides, and you guys can have my emails. Any questions that I didn't answer, you can feel free to shoot me an email. And I will have no problem answering them. Unfortunately, we have a hard stop at 4 o'clock. I'm so sorry I went long. I hope you guys found this valuable. Again, you will have these slides, and please feel free to email me any questions I didn't get to.
Thank you so much, Kendra. I do wish we had more time. This was so
Yeah.
wonderful. But thank you for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending the webinar. If you do have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact your state library's continuing education coordinator or Miss Elaine. And thanks again. And once you all leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you would complete it with your feedback. So thanks again, and be sure to join us on tomorrow for day 2 of the Southeast Online Collaborative Conference. The keynote session begins at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with Brian Hart speaking on nurturing relationships to cultivate resilience. Bye bye.